foundation for mindfulness, learning to meet experience with awareness. Arriving. Welcome. I'm glad you've chosen to spend this time here. Whether this is your first experience with mindfulness or you've practiced for many years and are simply returning with fresh eyes, you're warmly welcome. For the next hour or so, there's nothing you need to accomplish. You don't have to become calmer. You don't have to stop thinking. You don't have to meditate well. You don't have to make anything happen. The invitation is much simpler: to become interested in your own experience. If from time to time you notice yourself wondering whether you're doing the practice correctly, simply notice that too. The wish to do things well is part of being human. Mindfulness doesn't ask us to get rid of that wish. It simply invites us to include it within awareness. For a little while, allow the rest of the day to wait. There'll be time later for plans, for conversations, for responsibilities, for decisions. For now, just simply arrive. If you're sitting, allow yourself to settle comfortably into the chair. Feel the support beneath you. If your feet are touching the floor, notice that contact. Allow your hands to rest wherever they naturally fall. If standing is more comfortable, that's perfectly fine. If walking slowly is what your body needs today, that's perfectly fine as well. Mindfulness belongs to no particular posture. It belongs to awareness. If it feels comfortable, allow your eyes to close, or simply soften your gaze. There's no right way to begin. There's only beginning where you already are. Perhaps notice something that's been happening all along. The body is breathing. You don't have to make the next breath happen. The body has become breathing quietly since before you began listening. Simply notice that breathing is taking place. Take one slow, easy breath, then allow the breathing to return to its own natural rhythm. There's no need to improve it, no need to deepen it, no need to make it more peaceful. Just simply allow it to be exactly as it is. Now, notice where the breath is easiest to experience, perhaps at the nostrils, maybe in the movement of the chest, perhaps in the gentle rising and falling of the abdomen. There's no correct place. Only that place where the breath naturally becomes known. Allow your attention to rest there, not tightly, not with effort, simply with quiet interest. Stay with one complete breath, then another. Nothing else needs to happen. Nothing special needs to occur. Simply accompany the breathing. Perhaps the breathing feels very clear. Perhaps it seems faint. Either experience is perfectly fine. We're not trying to create a particular experience. We're becoming acquainted with the experience that is already there. Remain with the breathing for another few moments. Sooner or later, something else will probably ask for your attention. Perhaps a sound, maybe a sensation in the body, maybe a thought, perhaps a memory, perhaps a plan for later today. There's no need to prevent any of this. Just simply notice what awareness already knows, that it knows naturally. If the breath remains most apparent, know the breath. If a sound comes forward, no hearing. If the body quietly asks for attention, no feeling. If a thought appears, no thinking. Nothing has gone wrong. Awareness naturally knows what has become most apparent. And when the experience settles, the breath is still here, quietly waiting, a simple place to begin again. Perhaps you've already noticed that the mind doesn't remain with the breath for very long. A sound catches your attention, a memory appears, a plan quietly unfolds. Perhaps you've been listening to my words and suddenly realize you've been thinking about something entirely different. If that happened, just notice something very important. The moment you recognize that attention has wandered, awareness was already present. That moment of recognizing is mindfulness. Many of us begin mindfulness meditation believing that wandering is the mistake. Over time, we discover something much kinder. The wandering is not the mistake. The recognizing is the practice. Every return is a beginning, again and again. There's no limit to how many times we may begin. Continue allowing awareness to rest wherever experience naturally unfolds. If breathing is most apparent, no breathing. If hearing becomes vivid, no hearing. If the body quietly comes forward, know the body. There's no need to force awareness. There is no need to hold it in place. Experience unfolds. Awareness accompanies it. Perhaps you've noticed that awareness itself is remarkably uncomplicated. Thoughts may be busy, the body may be comfortable or uncomfortable. Sounds come and go, breathing continues. Awareness simply knows. It doesn't argue with experience. It doesn't hurry experience. It doesn't insist that experience become different before it's willing to receive it. For a few moments, simply trust that knowing. Sometimes people ask what mindfulness is. Definitions can be useful, but before offering one, I'd like you to notice what's already happened. You've known the breathing, you've known sounds, you've known thoughts, you've known moments of distraction, you've known moments of returning. Whatever has appeared, something within you has been capable of knowing it. The simple knowing is the beginning of mindfulness. Mindfulness is not something we create, it's a capacity we learn to recognize and trust. The more we practice, the more familiar it becomes. Not because awareness grows stronger, but because we become more willing to rest in it. So for a little while longer, continue simply accompanying the breath. Notice each inhalation arriving. Notice each exhalation completing itself. Without effort, one breath gives way to the next. No two are exactly alike. One might be slightly deeper, another a little shorter, one smooth, another uneven. The body is quietly teaching us something. Everything changes. Nothing remains exactly as it was a moment ago. The breath changes, sounds change, Thoughts change, sensations change. Life itself is always moving. We don't usually notice this because the mind prefers fixed ideas. My breathing, my body, my mood, my day. Yet when we become interested, we discover movement everywhere. Not because we've created it, but because we have begun paying attention. There can be something deeply reassuring about this. If experience is always changing, then no difficult moments last forever. No pleasant moment can be held forever either. Life continues unfolding, one moment giving way to the next. Mindfulness allows us to move with that unfolding rather than struggling against it. Without leaving the breath behind, notice now that breathing is taking place within a body. Feel the weight of your body resting where you are, the contact between your feet and the floor, the touch of clothing against your skin, perhaps the warmth of your hands, the coolness of the air on your face. There's no need to search for sensations. The body is always offering itself to awareness. We simply don't often pause long enough to notice. Much of our lives are spent thinking about the body. We wonder whether it's healthy enough, strong enough, attractive enough, comfortable enough. We remember how it once felt. We imagine how it may feel in the future. Mindfulness invites us into something much simpler, to experience the body directly from the inside, without immediately judging or evaluating it. The body has a quiet honesty. When we're tired, it tells us. When we're anxious, it often speaks before the thinking mind has found the words. Shoulders tighten, breathing becomes shallow, the stomach contracts. At other times, the body tells us something entirely different. The ease of walking, the warmth of sunlight, the comfort of sitting quietly. The body is always communicating. The question is simply whether we're listening. So for the next minute or two, let awareness rest with the body as a whole. Breathing, sitting, living. If one sensation naturally becomes more noticeable than the others, allow awareness to rest there. No need to wonder whether it should be present. It already is. Simply know it. Then notice what happens next. You may discover that awareness has a natural flexibility. For a few moments it rests with the body. Then a sound comes forward, perhaps a bird outside the window, the hum of a fan, a passing car. Without making any effort, awareness knows the sound. When the sound fades, the breath quietly returns to the foreground. Or perhaps a sensation in the body becomes more vivid. A feeling of warmth, a point of pressure, a slight ache. Awareness meets that as well. Nothing needs to be forced. Nothing needs to be held. Experience unfolds. Awareness accompanies it. There's a gentleness in this that is easy to overlook. Many of us have spent our lives believing that attention must always be directed, managed, or controlled. There's certainly times when that's useful. If we're learning a new skill or solving a difficult problem, concentrated attention is invaluable. Mindfulness includes concentration, but it's not limited to it. There's another way of paying attention, a receptive way, an interested way. Rather than trying to decide what deserves our awareness, we begin to trust that experience will reveal what most needs to be known. Think of sitting quietly beside a lake. You don't notice where the next ripple will appear, you simply notice. You don't decide that, you simply notice it. The lake reveals itself. Experience is much the same. The more quietly we observe, the more naturally it begins to unfold. Perhaps this is one reason mindfulness often feels like coming home. We spend so much time in our lives trying to make experience conform to our wishes. Meditation offers us a brief holiday from that effort. For a little while, we don't have to improve this moment before we're willing to inhabit it. We simply recognize it and receive it exactly as it is. So, as we continue sitting together, I'd like to invite you to notice something even quieter. Every experience carries a certain flavor. Some moments feel pleasant, others feel unpleasant. Many are neither one nor the other. They're simply ordinary. Notice, without searching too hard, what this moment feels like. Perhaps there's comfort in sitting, perhaps discomfort, perhaps nothing stands out at all. Whatever you discover is perfectly fine. The purpose is not to classify experience. The purpose is simply to become acquainted with it. The early Buddhist teachings call this quality feeling tone. It's not the same as emotion, it's something simpler. The immediate taste of experience before we begin thinking about it. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It happens so quickly that we usually miss it, yet it quietly influences much of our lives. A pleasant experience appears. Almost immediately, there's a movement toward it. Stay a little longer. An unpleasant experience appears. Almost immediately, there is another movement. I wish this would go away. A neutral experience appears. Often the mind simply looks elsewhere. None of this is a problem. It's simply how the human mind has learned to respond. Mindfulness allows us to notice these movements before they carry us away. The pleasant remains pleasant. The unpleasant remains unpleasant. What changes is that we begin to see our relationship with them. And in that seeing, there's often a little more space, a little less urgency, a little more freedom. Perhaps you can explore this for yourself. If the chair feels comfortable, simply no comfort. Notice whether the mind wants to hold on to it. If there is discomfort somewhere in the body, simply no discomfort. Notice whether the mind begins telling a story about it. You don't have to stop the story. You don't have to continue it. Simply notice that it's happening. This is one of the great gifts of mindfulness. We begin to distinguish between what is actually happening and the stories we immediately begin telling about what is happening. The distinction is gentle, yet it can change the way we live. A pain in the shoulder may simply be a pain in the shoulder. Then the mind quietly adds, this shouldn't be happening. How long will this last? What if it gets worse? Soon we're no longer experiencing the shoulder, we're experiencing the story. Now the story may be true or it may not. Mindfulness doesn't ask us to decide. It simply invites us to notice the difference. The same is true of pleasant experiences. The warmth of the sun on your face, the laughter of a child, a satisfying conversation. Almost immediately the mind whispers, oh, I hope this lasts, or I wish every day were like this. Again, nothing has gone wrong. This is simply the way the mind does doing what minds do. Mindfulness is not trying to silence the mind. It's helping us become intimate with its habits. And intimacy is very different from judgment. When we judge, we push away. When we become intimate, we understand. Perhaps this is one of the deepest movements in practice. We stop treating ourselves as problems to be solved. We begin meeting ourselves as living human beings with curiosity, with patience, and little by little, with kindness, all that happens. There's another aspect of experience that gradually becomes visible through practice, and at first we notice the body and the breath, then sounds, thoughts, feelings. Little by little, we begin to notice something even quieter, the condition of the mind itself. Not what the mind is thinking about, but what the mind is like. And there's an important difference. So imagine looking up at the sky. You might notice individual clouds drifting overhead. One cloud is large, another is small. Some move quickly, others hardly seem to move at all. Thoughts are often like those clouds. Mindfulness certainly allows us to notice them, but after a while we become interested in something larger. We begin noticing the weather. Is the day bright or overcast? Still or windy? Clear or stormy? In much the same way, we begin noticing the atmosphere of the mind. Is it quiet, busy, curious, heavy, open, restless, patient, rushed, hopeful, discouraged? There's no need to answer these questions perfectly. The purpose is simply to become acquainted with the mind as it is. For many of us, this is a new way of paying attention. We've been spending much of our lives looking outward or following the endless stream of thinking. Now, awareness quietly turns toward the mind itself, not to judge it, simply to know it. You may notice, for example, that the mind feels unusually busy today. Thoughts come quickly, one after another, plans, memories, questions, commentary. Nothing has gone wrong. A busy mind is simply what is present at this moment. On another day, the mind may feel spacious. Thoughts still arise, but there's more room for them. Neither state is better. Each simply deserves to be known. Sometimes we discover impatience, a subtle feeling that this moment ought to be different. Sometimes anticipation, waiting for what comes next. Sometimes resistance, sometimes ease, sometimes a quiet curiosity that asks for nothing except to understand. As we become familiar with these changing conditions, something remarkable begins to happen. Instead of saying, "Hey, I'm anxious," we may begin noticing anxiety is present. Instead of "I'm impatient," perhaps impatience is here. Now, this might sound like a small change in language, but it reflects a profound change in perspective. The mind state is no longer the whole of who we are. It's become something awareness can gently know. This doesn't separate us from our experience, and if anything, it allows us to meet it more honestly. We stop arguing with every passing state of mind. We stop assuming it will last forever. We become interested, patient, curious. The mind begins to resemble the weather. A storm may arrive, rain may fall, strong winds may blow for a while. Then, perhaps without our noticing exactly when, the sky begins to clear. No weather remains forever. The same is true of the mind. Restlessness changes, joy changes, confusion changes, calm changes. Everything continues moving. Mindfulness allows us to discover this directly, not as an idea, but as an experience. Perhaps for the next few moments, there's nothing you need to change. Simply notice the quality of your own mind. Is it settled or wandering, bright or sleepy, open or contracted? There's no correct answer. Whatever you discover, allow awareness to know it gently. Then, just as we've done many times before, let the next breath become a quiet place to return. not because the mind needs fixing, but because the breath reminds us that awareness is already here, always ready to begin again. Now, kindness is something that's sometimes misunderstood. You may think of it as trying to make ourselves feel better or persuading ourselves that everything is all right. That isn't the kind of kindness mindfulness points towards. The kindness of awareness is much simpler. It's the willingness to remain present, to stay with experience long enough to understand it before we try to change it. Think for a moment about someone who's listened to you deeply. Perhaps they offered a very little advice, perhaps they didn't solve your problem, yet you left the conversation feeling lighter, not because your circumstances had changed, but because you've been received. Awareness offers us that same possibility. It receives experience before judging it, it listens before speaking, it notices before deciding. Now, this may be one of the quiet reasons mindfulness can be so healing. Not because it removes pain, but because it changes our relationship to pain. The same is true of joy. We don't have to grasp it so tightly. We can simply enjoy it while it's here. As awareness becomes steadier, another question sometimes begins to arise. Not, what am I experiencing? We've already been exploring that. A different question begins to appear. How am I meeting this experience? There's no need to answer immediately. Just simply let that question rest for a moment. How am I meeting this breath? How am I meeting this sensation? How am I meeting this thought? Perhaps with curiosity, perhaps with impatience, perhaps with tenderness, perhaps with a quiet wish that things were different. Whatever you discover, simply include it. The purpose of the question is not self-evaluating, it's recognition. Sometimes we discover that we've been struggling with an experience without realizing it. At other times, we discover that awareness has been quietly open all along. Neither discovery is better than the other. Each is simply another opportunity to understand ourselves a little more deeply. Over the years, I've come to appreciate that the quality of our attention often matters as much as the object of our attention. Two people may notice the same anxious thought. One immediately begins arguing with it, the other quietly recognizing anxiety is here. The thought may be exactly the same. The relationship is what is different. That small difference can change everything. It creates a room to breathe, room to listen, room to respond rather than simply react. Perhaps this is why mindfulness gradually feels less like a technique and more like a way of living. We begin carrying this quality of attention into ordinary moments. Sometimes someone speaks sharply to us, and before reacting, we notice the tightening of the body. A wave of disappointment moves through us. We know it's there. That knowing may last only a second. Yet in that second, something important becomes possible. We're no longer completely carried away by habit. There's space enough to choose. Not always, not perfectly, but more often than before. This is how practice quietly leaves the meditation cushion. Not through determination, but through familiarity. Awareness becomes a place where we know how to return to, again and again, as naturally as returning home at the end of the day. So you may have noticed that throughout this time together, we've returned to the breath many times. The breath has accompanied us from the beginning, not because it's the only object worthy of attention, but because it's always available. So we gradually can come to think of the breath less as an anchor than as a home. We leave home to meet the world. We return home to rest. Then we leave home again. Neither movement is more important than the other. If a bird begins singing outside your window, awareness naturally knows the sound. If a strong emotion arises, awareness naturally knows the emotion. If the body calls for attention, awareness knows the body. And when that experience is past, the breath is still there, quietly waiting, never demanding, simply welcoming us back. There's great comfort in discovering that we always have somewhere to begin. Not because the breath solves our problems, because it reminds us that we're here, alive, breathing, present. Sometimes that's all we need for this moment. And sometimes it's much more than we imagined. Remain with that for a few moments. Simply breathing, simply sitting. Allowing awareness to rest wherever it naturally settles. There's no need to hold the mind in place. If attention wanders, notice it. If it returns, notice that too. If the body feels uncomfortable or comfortable, no comfort. If it feels uncomfortable, no discomfort. Nothing has to be excluded. Nothing has to be fixed before it can be known. One of the quiet surprises of practice is that after a while, mindfulness begins appearing when we least expect it. You may be standing at the kitchen sink, washing a plate. Water, warm water, moves across your hands. The plate feels smooth beneath your fingers. Sunlight comes through the window. For just a moment, you're completely there. Nothing extraordinary has happened. You're simply present. Or perhaps you're walking from the parking lot into a grocery store. Without intending to meditate, you notice your feet touching the ground. You feel the movement of your legs. A cool breeze crosses your face. You hear someone laughing in the distance. For a few seconds, there's nowhere else to be finding yourself. The future is not asking for your attention. The past is quiet. There's only walking. Those moments often arrive without our planning them. The practice has begun to accompany us. It no longer belongs only to the minutes we spend sitting quietly. It begins finding us in the middle of ordinary life. I sometimes think this is one of the most encouraging signs of practice. Not that meditation becomes deeper, but that life becomes more available. The ordinary begins to reveal itself. The first sip of coffee or tea or water in the morning, the familiar sound of a loved one's voice, rain against a window, a child's hand reaching for yours, the warmth of a favorite sweater on a cool morning. None of these experiences becomes meaningful because mindfulness transforms them. They become meaningful because they were already part of a life that deserved our attention. Mindfulness simply helps us receive what has always been given. Of course, life doesn't uh, offer only pleasant moments. There are days when the body hurts, days when disappointments arrive unexpectedly, days when the mind feels heavy, days when uncertainty seems to touch everything. Mindfulness was never intended only for peaceful moments. It was meant for these moments as well. perhaps especially for these moments. When something difficult enters our lives, our first impulse is often to make it disappear. Sometimes that's wise, and if we can relieve suffering, we should. If someone needs our help, we help. If something can be repaired, we repair it. Mindfulness never asks us to be passive. It simply reminds us that before we respond wisely, we first need to see clearly. Now, there are also many situations that can't be changed immediately. Waiting for medical results, living with illness, grieving someone we love, growing older, watching a child struggle, feeling uncertain about the future. No amount of wishing makes these moments disappear. What mindfulness offers is not escape, it instead offers companionship. Instead of facing the moment alone, we discover that awareness can remain with us, breath by breath, step by step. Sometimes that quiet companionship is enough to carry us through which once felt unbearable. There have been many times in our lives when we wanted meditation to remove uncertainty, perhaps. Instead, it can teach me how to live with uncertainty, not all at once, not heroically, simply one day at a time, one breath at a time, one conversation at a time. Looking back, I can realize that what changed was not life. Life remained beautifully unpredictable. What changed was my confidence that awareness could meet whatever life brought. Not perfectly, not without fear, but faithfully. That confidence didn't appear suddenly. It grew in the same way a friendship grows, by returning again and again. So over time, awareness becomes less like a practice I remembered to do and more like a quiet companion who has been walking beside me all along. Maybe this is why mindfulness has endured for so many centuries. It doesn't promise a life without difficulty. No practice could honestly make that promise. Instead, it points toward the possibility that we need not face difficulty without awareness. And awareness has a remarkable capacity to remain present even when the mind is uncertain, even when the heart is breaking, even when we don't know what comes next. Perhaps this is one of the quiet forms of courage, not pretending that everyone is fine, not denying pain, simply remaining present long enough for wisdom to find us. Sometimes wisdom arrives as an answer. Sometimes it arrives as patience. Sometimes it arrives simply as the willingness to stay. And sometimes for this moment, staying is enough. Stay with the breathing for a little while longer here. There's no need to make anything happen. Simply notice that this breath has arrived. Then another. Then another. So life unfolds in much the same way. One moment arrives. It asks something of us. Then it passes. Another follows. We often imagine that we're living our lives in years or months. In truth, we live them one moment at a time. Mindfulness gently returns us to that simple fact. It asks very little, only that we be present for the moment we're actually living. Perhaps notice how quiet awareness is. Thoughts have a voice. They comment, they compare, they remember, they anticipate. Awareness does none of those things. It simply knows a sound, a sensation, a breath, a thought, a feeling, without arguing, without hurrying, without asking experience to become different before it can be received. There's something deeply trustworthy about that. Not because awareness always tells us what to do, often it doesn't, but because it allows us to see clearly before we act. Sometimes that clarity is only a brief pause, a single breath before speaking, a moment of recognizing anger before words are spoken, a moment of noticing fear before it quietly becomes certainty. Our lives are often shaped by moments like these, not because they're dramatic, but because they're real. Perhaps you've noticed that we've been not trying to achieve any special state. There's been no perfect breath, no perfect posture, no perfect meditation. Some moments have felt settled, others perhaps distracted. Both belong. The purpose of mindfulness is not to produce a particular experience, it's to develop a different relationship with whatever experience is here. If calm appears, we know calm. If restlessness appears, we know restlessness. If joy appears, we know joy. If sadness appears, we know sadness. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be held on to. For a few moments, simply notice the overall quality of the mind. Not its particular thoughts, just simply its atmosphere. Is it quiet? Is it busy? Is it curious? Is it tired? Is it open? Is it restless? There's no need to find exactly the right word. The purpose is simply to become familiar with the mind as it is. So perhaps instead of saying, yeah, I'm anxious, you might notice anxiety is here. Instead of impatient, simply impatience is here. So this is not creating distance, it's making room. The mind state is no longer the whole of who you are. It's become something awareness can gently know. And like every other experience we've explored today, it too will change. There's a quiet freedom in discovering that awareness is larger than any single thought, any single emotion, any single moment. Experience continues changing. Awareness continues receiving, again and again, like breath itself, always returning, always here. Before perhaps we come to the end of our time together, simply notice where you are. This room, this chair, this breath, this body, this moment. There's something quietly honest about beginning exactly here. We spend much of our lives waiting for life to begin under better circumstances and conditions. Mindfulness gently reminds us that life has been unfolding all along. Nothing new has been added. We've simply paused long enough to notice what has always been present: the rhythm of breathing, the language of the body, the changing movement of thoughts and feelings, and the quiet capacity of awareness to receive them all. If someone were to ask you what you've been doing during this time, you might be tempted to say, well, I've been learning mindfulness. And maybe there's another way to say it. Perhaps you've been remembering something. Many of us can recall moments, especially as children, when we became completely absorbed in what was right in front of us. watching rain against a window, following an insect across the sidewalk, listening without needing anything to happen next. Nothing about those moments needed to be productive. They were complete in themselves. As adults, life becomes more complicated. Responsibilities multiply. The thinking mind becomes wonderfully skilled at planning, organizing, remembering, and solving problems. Those are valuable abilities, and mindfulness is not asking us to give them up. It simply reminds us that there's another way of knowing life. Not through thinking, but through breathing, listening, feeling, being present. There's a sentence we can often return to over the years. Our awareness is already here. Our practice is simply learning to trust it. We don't create awareness, we become more familiar with it. Little by little, it becomes a quiet companion. Some days the mind settles easily, other days it wanders almost continuously. The practice remains the same. Notice, begin again, not because wandering is failure, but because returning is what awareness naturally does, again and again. As our time together begins to draw to a close, notice one more breath. Not because it's the last breath of this meditation, but simply because it's this breath, the only one that can ever be lived. Feel the body breathing, the gentle movement of inhaling, the quiet release of exhaling. Nothing to improve, nothing to complete, only this living moment. So when this meditation ends, the practice does not end. It simply continues in a different setting. Maybe you'll notice your hand reaching for a door handle, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the feeling of your feet touching the ground as you walk, the sound of someone's voice before you begin to reply. None of those moments will seem extraordinary. Most will appear too ordinary to deserve our attention. Yet this is where our lives are lived. You don't have to remember everything we've explored together. In fact, I hope you won't try. Perhaps it's enough to remember one simple practice. When you notice that your mind has wandered, pause. Feel one breath. Begin again. Not because something has gone wrong, because beginning again is simply what awareness knows how to do. Over time, those countless quiet beginnings become less like a meditation technique and more like a way of meeting your life. One breath, one conversation, one ordinary moment at a time. So before we part, I'd like to leave you with one final reflection. Many people begin mindfulness hoping that it will change their lives. In time, we often discover something quieter. Life continues to unfold much as it always has. The body grows older, plans succeed and fail, joy visits, sorrow visits, periods of clarity come and go, periods of uncertainty come and go. Mindfulness does not place us outside these experiences. It allows us to meet them more fully. When we stop struggling quite so hard with the moment we've been given, we sometimes discover that it contains more wisdom than we first imagined. Not because every moment is pleasant, many are not. Not because every question has an immediate answer, many do not. But because awareness can remain present even when certainty disappears. Perhaps wisdom is simply simpler than we imagine. Not knowing everything, simply seeing clearly enough to take the next step. If you decide to continue practicing after today, just keep it simple. Find a few quiet moments, let the breath become a familiar place to return. When another experience naturally asks for your attention, allow awareness to meet it. When it settles, gently return to the breath. And throughout the day, pause from time to time. Feel your feet on the ground. Take one continuous breath. Listen before speaking. There's no need to be mindful every moment. No one lives that way. Simply remember often enough that awareness becomes a familiar companion. Each remembered moment makes the next one a little easier. So thank you for allowing me to accompany you during this time. No recording can give you mindfulness. No teacher can hand it to you. At best, we remind one another of something that has always been quietly present. From here, your own experience will become your greatest teacher. Trust it. Be curious about it. Meet it with patience. And when you forget, as every one of us does, pause. Notice. Begin again. So, may awareness become a trusted companion. May it help you meet both joy and sorrow with an open heart. And may this ordinary life, exactly as it is, continue to reveal itself one breath at a time. Thank you.